Hi guys, this is Joe with Tom from FastTrackFBA. Today he's talking with me and I'm talking with him, and we're going to talk about my 5 top tips about accounting. One of them is why you shouldn't use a limited company, and we're going to talk about it now. Stay tuned. Is that okay? Yeah!
Today I have taken a road trip into central London to come and meet my good friend and accountant, Joe Cox from E-commerce Accountants. If you don't know, it's on the background. Now today all I want to do quite simply is talk about the 5 things that Joe is going to recommend that you think about if you are selling on online arbitrage or even doing Amazon, that is going to make a difference to your business when it comes to accounting. Joe, obviously, thank you very much for, number one, inviting me here today, and also, thank you very much for making the time available. So can you just tell everyone about yourself and who you are?
Yeah, of course. And let me say thank you so much for coming in. It is always a pleasure to see you, and it's nice to see you here in rainy, miserable London. Usually when I speak to Tom, he's off jet setting somewhere in the world, and I really don't like it. So it's nice to see you today. Thank you so much. My name's Joe. I am the founder of E-commerce Accountants, which is, as the name should hopefully suggest, an accountancy that specialises in working with e-commerce and online businesses. We work with a lot of online arbitrage sellers, private labellers, drop shippers, and then a few non-e-commerce businesses, because e-commerce business owners happen to be quite entrepreneurial, so they ask us to do other things. Like FastTrackFBA, for example, I would say is not strictly e-commerce. Yeah. I'm also an online seller myself. I started my very first private label business back in 2012, and it was because of that, because I couldn't find an accountant to outsource the business to, that I saw that there was a gap in the market. So I formed the company, and here we are today. I say 8 years later, but the online business was formed quite a few years before the accountancy. But yeah.
What would you recommend they should focus on? Top 5 things. Take it away.
So I don't know if I'll have 5, whether I have more or less. The first thing I would say to people, especially if you're getting started, is relax, don't panic, breathe. Almost like you did to me a minute ago. When you start a business, especially if you're a sole trader, you don't need to register with HMRC straight away. You don't need to start filing and paying taxes. There is some sort of leeway on it. I'll quickly summarise those there. The personal tax year goes from the 6th of April to the 5th of April each year, and you have until the following January to file and pay your taxes. So if it's, say, August now and you get started, you've got until not this January, but next January to file and pay your taxes. So if you start selling, you're not suddenly going to have the tax man knocking, demanding money, issuing penalties. So you can relax, pause, focus on just getting started, maybe speak to an accountant, but the advice we usually give to people is that, and we would say then come back to us in 6 months' time, because there isn't anything you need to do straight away. That brings me on to my second of the 5 hopeful tips, and that is that you really need to be keeping good records. So one thing that helps us and that helps you to keep everything in order, I would say, is to make sure that you use a digital filing system. So Dropbox, Google Drive, Box, as I'm sure I think you use Google Drive.
Yeah, use Google Drive.
I'm quite OCD with it, and I really do suggest everyone else be like this. Create a folder for your business, name it whatever you want to call your business, and then within that folder, create a folder for purchases. Within that folder, create the year. So if we're doing now, 2020. And within that folder, create one for August. So 08 August. The reason you put 08 is to keep it alphabetical. And then within the August folder, every single time you make a purchase, save the purchase there. I like to date it. So I can't remember today's date, 22/08/2020. And then that way, if in 18 months' time your accountant says to you, what was that £37.22 that you spent on the 22nd of August? Oh, it was that. Or you do what Tom does, you do the lazy thing, and you just share the whole Google Drive folder, and then we don't have to ask, and you don't have to tell us. So you save our time and we save yours. Probably number 3 would be, don't worry about forming a limited company. A lot of people think that when they're starting a business that they have to form a separate entity. The drawback with it is that it's going to create an extra bit of headache. You're going to have extra accounting fees. There's extra compliance to think about. When you're getting started, you're not going to make all your profit in the first week. You'll make it in the years to come. You speak about testing things early. In the testing phase, there's no need to have a company. Trade as a sole trader, there are some other advantages to that as well, which actually I'll quickly go on if we've got time. But trade as a sole trader, it's much easier, and it means you can just get started faster because you don't want to form a company and then get an accountant and go through all of this hassle only to have to close it in 6 or 9 months' time.
And can I just ask you, and I think I know what you're going to say, so I talk to a lot of Amazon sellers about this, is my understanding of the situation is that when you're a sole trader, you're an entity, i.e. you're not an entity, it's you. But when you form a limited company, that's another entity. And what a lot of people have been doing is they've been trading as a sole trader up to or close to the VAT rate, which is currently 85,000, and then forming a limited company, and Amazon transfers the Amazon selling account from the sole trader to the limited company. And what it does in effect is then because it's another entity, it resets that VAT rate. Is that legit? Is that
so? Funny enough, the way I was trained and studied, years of studying, I was always under the impression that was known as artificial separation and wasn't allowed. And we had a client come through recently who was convinced that it was as you said, and I was constantly like, no, what do you know? And I started digging into the case law, and actually that is correct. As long as the business wasn't supposed to be registered for VAT before you created it, there are rules essentially that say, or there's law to say that it starts again. If the sole trade had exceeded the threshold and was supposed to be registered, you couldn't deregister and it doesn't reset. So it's only if you hadn't already crossed the threshold.
You heard it there.
Yeah.
Obviously, number one, speak to an accountant. This isn't professional legal, professional accounting advice. This is a YouTube video. Speak to Joe. He knows his stuff. But it's to say that if you haven't crossed over that 85,000, stay below it, and then obviously get your accountant, create a limited company. You should be okay. But again, speak to a professional.
Yeah.
This isn't exactly.
Yeah, we might have to put like a disclaimer that speeds across the bottom here. I would say that the reason for being a sole trader first isn't actually for the VAT. It is a good reason, but I feel like it's slightly unethical, so I wouldn't advise people to do that. The main benefit of being a sole trader first is that if you make a loss when you're a sole trader, which some people don't like to think about, but when you start a business, I don't know what the percentages are, but we see a lot of people in their first year lose money. And most people are doing this as a side hustle, as a second job, and as a reason to escape their job. And so they've got profitable income that they're receiving. If you make a loss with your sole trade, you can offset that loss against your trading or your other income. So if you're in the UK and you're paying PAYE, you'll be paying tax throughout the year. If you make a loss through your sole trade, your accountant can offset the loss and then you'll get a tax rebate, which is better for cash flow, which you can't do if you're a limited company, because if the limited company makes the loss, it's the limited company's loss, not yours. So the loss just carries forward in the limited company. So that's one of the reasons that I would say don't form a company until you're actually making profit.
So 4 and 5?
4 might need to be bolted on as like a 2B.
Okay.
I would say when you are trading as a sole trader, and also as a limited company, the same applies, but I would advise setting up a separate bank account at the very least, so that you can keep your business expenditure and your personal expenditure completely separate. And this is kind of more so important with IYA businesses, because a lot of the things you're buying aren't necessarily from suppliers that are obvious, like Tesco or Asda. It's very difficult to say this was a business purchase. And not just for you, but for your accountant. If you give me your personal bank statements, how do I know what's a business expense and what isn't? And same with credit cards. People love getting Amex points. It might be your fault going out there telling people to spend. But if you're going to do it, get a separate card, because exactly the same thing applies. It creates a lot of work. And not just for us, for you, because we're going to be asking you, what is this? What is that? What is this? And it's so much easier. Just start with a really good foundation, good habits, keep a separate account, put all your business expenditure there, and then that's it. Again, you don't have to worry.
Then top tip. I like that one.
Maybe put that above.
Well, let me ask you the question. Okay, so you're an accountant. The question, the fifth one might be like, at what point should they consider getting an accountant? When do they need to get in contact?
It's a good question. The answer is always it depends. It depends on your personality type. If you're someone who worries a lot and wants to ask a lot of questions, which is quite common for a lot of new people, businesses, and rightly so. If you've got a lot of questions and you're worried about making mistakes, then definitely do it sooner rather than later. If you're someone who just crashes through things without thinking about it, then obviously you're probably not watching something like this or anyway. But it also depends on if you're asking us to do the bookkeeping or if you're doing it yourself, which is something I'll probably talk about in the next point. If you want someone to do your bookkeeping, I would suggest doing it sooner because you don't want to have to look back and remember what you did on a particular date. But if you've got good habits and record keeping in place, that's easier. Usually people get in touch with us and I tell them, make sure you've got good record keeping. Now come back in 9 months and keep doing what I've just told you to do. I would say if you're approaching the VAT threshold, that's usually the best time to speak with an accountant. Maybe the month before that, because VAT is such a tricky and complex field that it's really not worth your time. And if you make a mistake, the VAT man is particularly aggressive. So I would say that's probably the best time to get in touch with someone. The other time to do it is if actually you've got a filing deadline coming up. So if you start trading in say January and then your first personal tax year will end that April, you're going to have a shorter amount of time to file your tax return than someone who starts in May. So if you've got a filing deadline coming up, definitely speak to an accountant. If you're not sure about the filing deadline, then speak to one, and then we'll advise you.
And I'm not even going to say here like that whole kind of like company tax year and then personal filing tax year.
Yeah,
just speak to an accountant.
The last point I would say is that I'd strongly recommend not trying to do things yourself. So a lot of people really want to save costs, which I fully get. As a business owner, you want to keep your profits as high as possible. You need to value your time. And although, yes, you probably are clever enough to do everything that a bookkeeper or an accountant does, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. Anyone can learn it. You shouldn't do it as a business owner.
Yeah.
I hear you preach about this all the time, Tom. Like you're whether you add value, and you should really just look to outsource that as quickly as possible, because although you can do it, your time probably isn't best spent doing it. If you're doing OA, your time is best spent sourcing and making more money.
I completely agree with that one. Joe said it, I preach about it, and the question you've got to ask yourself is that you can go out there and learn how to do all the accounting side, and hey, don't get me wrong, ironically I did most of that. I kind of figured it out and did it, but you're like, I would have been much better spending that time going out there making the money to actually just pay him to do it when I first started. And I kind of realised that stupidity, should we say. So, and you've got to think about, where do you want to take your business? If you just want to keep your business small and as much profit as possible, then okay, maybe, but my God, I said to people, if you are looking to start this business to quite simply replace an income, you might just be better getting a job. Less risk, less everything, less stress, and you can switch off and have paid holidays. But if you're going to grow a business to grow it, have staff, well, ultimately you're going to get too big that you can't do the accounting anymore. So you know what, you need a team, and Joe, e-commerce accountants, they are part of your team, and so just pay him, get it done. Your time is more valuable spent on driving your business forward rather than saving the costs. Quick question for you: if anyone wants to get in contact, obviously you've shared a wealth of knowledge right now, and obviously we've talked loads of times. Mm-hmm. How can they get in contact with you? What's the easiest way?
If people want to get in touch, they can visit our website, which is www.ecommerceaccountants.co.uk. We're always changing our website, but usually we've got some sort of call to action in the top right hand corner to fill out a quote. You fill out the form, and then it goes through to my colleague Stefan, who's You can book a quick call with him. You'll go over any initial questions.
And one thing I will just add to that is, we've had a lot of conversations today, and the one thing I really liked that Joe mentioned was that if you contact him and you've just started in Amazon, maybe you've got some questions, and oh, do I need an accountant or not? They will be really honest with you. They'll just say, hey, you know what? Right now you don't need us. Go away, make some sales, come back in this time, and just having that. Okay, well that's cool. Take on board the advice that Joe shared today, but then come back at that time, knowing that you don't have to spend that money straight away. So, Joe, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for making your time available today. And obviously, in your office.
Yeah, I actually sent the entire team home just so that Tom could come in. Had to close the office for you.
Well, honestly, I feel privileged, so thank you very much. So I just want to say, from myself and anyone watching, you lot, Joe, thank you so much for sharing and obviously making your time available today. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.